Making someone comfortable is about having confidence that's actually contagious. So when somebody has confidence that's artificial, it makes other people feel small. A lot of times our experience of the world is not really reality. Our experience is what our reticular formation thinks is important and what it's searching for, and it will just kind of delete everything else. We automatically accept things that we think the tribe is accepting, which is how these like weird, stupid ass ideas spread so quickly, because we have the illusion of lots of people doing this one behavior. Physiognomy started back I think in the late 1700s, and they would make these models of the human head. And based on where the lumps are on the skull, they would say, oh, this is a high intelligence and this is a low intelligence. And then they went into facial shapes and structures. And I think 99% of that stuff has been discredited, completely discredited. But I will say as a caveat, if I want to I want to do research on high stakes intelligence interrogations where we have like a detainee and an interrogator, and I give a couple of college kids a lunch voucher to come up here and volunteer for an experiment, and then they pronounce like, oh, we did research on interrogation. There is nothing that a college can simulate that would be even remotely close to an intelligence interrogation scenario where their person's sleep deprived, they're facing the death penalty if they give out information. You can't replicate a lot of human behavior in some college basement somewhere doing an experiment. So it's very hard to quantify. And I think a lot of people make a terrible mistake of thinking that human behavior is a science and not an art form. Because every human being is a little bit different. Everybody's got different background and different culture and different bullshit from their childhood, still running the little programs and stuff in the background. So treating it like it's geometry, where we can just accurately predict everything and like relying solely on one psychology textbook, and that's the source, that's ground truth about every human being in the world. I think that is a mistake, but I do think it is a blend of art and science. And I think what I do when it comes to behavior profiling is a lot like being a meteorologist. I have all of these little data points. So this is likely what's going to happen. So we deal in likelihood instead of like, this is the pronounced actual thing. One of the fastest ways that a person gets to feel comfortable, there's a few different ways. Number one is that they see you as predictable and reliable. And so that starts with like, this person, A, is not a threat. So not being a threat means I'm not facing a person head on. Our brains are kind of wired to be a little bit more competitive when people are sitting directly facing head on to each other. This is why in the bars, even in the Old West, they knew this. They didn't know really why, but they knew that I'm going to sit a bunch of dudes at a bar who are getting drunk. For them to be able to talk to each other, they have to see each other. So let's put up a huge mirror on the back of the bar where they can look at each other without facing each other. So it lowered the likelihood of fights taking place. So that would be number one. It's like, am I in some kind of nonverbal position that creates some kind of adversarial thought process in their mammalian part of their brain? Like if women have the exact same fight or flight response. So like when another human, a woman or a man, comes up and like facing directly onto that person, it triggers our brain to say, this might be a conflict or confrontation. This might be something I have to deal with physically. So let me just explain, like our brain has not changed in about 200,000 years. And we do not have a part of the brain dedicated, a hierarchical structure of the brain dedicated to language. None. This is why it takes babies years to start talking and speaking. We have to learn that. But a baby can walk. A baby can learn this sign language, like milk and I want more. And we can do all of that because we have hierarchical structures for those things, but we do not for language. Language is relatively new to our species. So we rely on a lot of nonverbal communication, but we read other people at this gut level. Or if it's a woman, it would be reading people with like some intuition, or women's intuition is way better than men's, in my opinion. But we read these micro movements first, and the mammalian brain is what's truly in charge of a human being. So if I'm thinking I need to make someone comfortable, what most people would think is, what are the words I need to say? And language is always above and beyond the least important thing in persuasion and influence. Least important. It's the last part of our brain that evolved, so it's the least important thing. So if you think of any sales team in the world, and I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of dudes who do like online sales, they have a sales. One of the biggest mistakes I've seen since I've retired from the military and now I train a lot of sales teams around the country is they want a better sales script. That's it. So I show up and they're like, oh, we need different words. And I say, if you paid me $10 million and I developed the best sales script on planet Earth in the history of humankind and gave it to one of your salespeople that has social anxiety, it's the crappiest sales script in the world. And you're going to blame it on the script. I can give you every single word to say, but if you're not communicating the right signals non-verbally, those words are meaningless. They have no effect. So it's so important that we understand my ability to make another person comfortable is nonverbal, 90% nonverbal. So it's how am I approaching that person? So making someone comfortable and making someone trust you are about the same thing. And then we get into authority. Are you an authority figure? So you can be dominant, but not domineering. You can be in control, but not controlling. But you do this all non-verbally. Are you in charge of yourself? Do you have high self-confidence? Do you present a non-threatening body language and demeanor? And one of the best, most powerful ways to start communicating that is by communicating with your palms open. And this is proven. There's even a TED Talk about it by a good friend of mine named Mark Bowden. And he's on the Behavior Panel YouTube channel with us. We cover a lot of true crime, body language, breakdowns and stuff. If you watch his TED Talk, it's fascinating. But as a quick Post-it note summary of what this means is, while you're speaking, if you're speaking with your arms and hands at navel height, so like even with your belly button, and your palms open when you're making these important points in what you're saying, people are like 10x more likely to believe you and trust in what you say just by having these open palms. And you can demonstrate it so quickly and so easily. Like even in a seated position, if I'm sitting here like this and I'm covering my genitals right now, which is a fear response when people lie or when they're scared or when they're really fearful about what they're saying or what they're experiencing, right? And I say, Jack, you can trust me. It feels weird. So if I cover my abdomen, because we don't have bones right here to protect organs, right? So one of the things we do when we're fearful is put bones where there aren't any bones. So we'll kind of cover this abdomen. Women are more likely to do it, but I say, Jack, you can trust me. Or if we're talking like this and I say, Jack, you can trust me. It feels different in your brain because we have this hard wiring to see this openness, this open nonverbal communication. It feels completely different. And Mark Bowden calls this the truth plane, where people are just way more likely to accept what you say or believe you. And in reality, making someone comfortable is about having confidence that's actually contagious. So when somebody has confidence that's artificial, it makes other people feel small. If your confidence is genuine and you're not faking confidence out of ego, that's what makes people small. But if I'm truly confident, it should make other people confident. Even if they have social anxiety, even if they're stressed out, I have a calm demeanor and enough composure that my confidence, I have enough that I can transfer to other people. If we talk about persuasion and influence, whether you're a cult recruiter or an interrogator or a parent trying to raise a kid, you want your confidence to be contagious. Your number one goal is to transfer my level of confidence to that other person so they can make a decision. I want to increase their confidence. So that's the number one thing, is having confidence to the point where it's transferable to the other person. Everything that we're seeing right now is made to set something up. And this did not look like an amateur. I will say that you're an operator. You've spent some time over there doing this stuff. It didn't look like an amateur did any of that stuff. So it looks like there's something's being set up. But if you go back on that formula, the way that an infomercial works is to socialize the product to you, to minimize the cost and to minimize how big of a deal it is to make the purchase, to rationalize how to make that purchase and say that it's only 3 easy payments of $19.99 or whatever it is, and then project. Like, most people don't own this, and the only reason they don't own it is because they didn't know about it before. The goal of a bot farm is to inflate tribe, and authority. And it could be focus if something is novel or unique enough. So a bot farm can do that. And that's like, let's say there's something massively unique or different or interesting. Then it's so pervasive that a few authority figures or celebrities retweet it or repost it somewhere. And then there's so many accounts that it has the appearance of looking like other people in my tribe are liking this, and it's normalized to these other people in my tribe, so it must be popular. Therefore, there's no logic to this. Our brain's not logically going through these steps. We automatically accept things that we think the tribe is accepting, which is how these like weird, stupid ass ideas spread so quickly, because we have the illusion of lots of people doing this one behavior. Yeah. So if I wanted you, let's say I want to weaponize Sean, I'm going to show you videos of bad group of people doing really, really bad things all the time. And the more I can show that to you, you're building up hatred and all this other stuff. But what am I really shifting? What's the second step of PSYOPs that we talked about? Is shifting context. The only time that you'll really want to kill someone, if you've never killed anybody before, let's say John that works at H&R Block, like we need to weaponize that guy. He has to be in a situation where he thinks he is preventing death or violence. And if I can shift that context into a violence scenario, your brain is already put into a place of this is a context where violence is acceptable and normal. So it's perception, then context. And then it's a PCP model is what we teach at NCI. You shift perception, then context, and then it equals permission. Perception, context, and permission. The actual neuroscience is that it's weaponizing part of our brain that's looking around to see what everyone else is doing and to see if I should change. There's a part of our brain called the locus ceruleus. This is how we detect facial expressions in other people and whether or not you know in a grocery store whether someone's going to punch you or try to offer you a coupon or something. But this is our sensor for, is everything going as planned? Is everything going as it should right now? And the moment that stuff goes off, then we have novelty. So our brain says, whoop, there's something new. I need to focus on that. So that little focusing part of our brain is called the reticular formation. And that's the part that's active, like if you're buying a white Toyota Tundra and you look at them on the internet for a month, and then you finally buy a white Toyota Tundra, you're going to see them everywhere. Because your brain, since you've been looking at it, says, oh, the human thinks that this is important, so I'm going to search for it everywhere I go. So that's our brain's little focusing mechanism. So if I have told the mammalian part of my brain over and over again that this one thing is important, then the brain will just look for it everywhere. Like it's not like everyone went out and bought a Tundra at the same time as you. It's that you told your reticular formation or reticular activating system that thing was important. And the brain said, okay, Sean's looking at this one thing. I'm going to search for it. I'm going to find it everywhere. Which also means that at the end of the day, maybe somebody comes home and they're like, hey, I saw 17 other Tundras on the road just on my way home from work. It's insane. I didn't realize everybody had one. But you'll never be able to tell somebody how many Toyota Corollas you saw on the road because your brain wasn't searching for them. A lot of times our experience of the world is not really reality. Our experience is what our reticular formation thinks is important and what it's searching for, and it will just kind of delete everything else. So our definition of the world is our definition of the reticular formation's priorities. Brainwashing follows a 4-step formula, and that is, it spells out the word fear. So we had fate earlier, now we have fear. And that's focus, emotion, agitation, and repetition. So I'm going to gain your focus with tons of new novel stuff. I'm going to get you in and take you through this quiz or this personality quiz. I'm going to get you in and take you to this candlelight ceremony that's kind of soft and kind. Then an emotion happens. Now we have love bombing, or now you have to go through some trial or tribulation, some initiation. Then agitation. Now I have to disrupt patterns in your life. So if you normally do one thing, I'm going to tell you to do something different in your life. You're going to have to come in here every other day. So I'm going to agitate your schedule. I might agitate your social circle and say you need to disconnect from all those friends. So I'm going to do something to make your brain, it's novelty, just like what we've been talking about. So I'm going to inject as much novelty in your life as possible to agitate your brain so that it's brand new. I can rewire your brain because of that agitation. And then the final step of brainwashing is repetition. So it's working the same way that you would brainwash anybody, is the exact same way that cults work. Gain the focus, get them into an emotional state. And we talked about this at the very beginning of the show, that fractionation state, up and down, up and down. And they go down a little deeper every single time, which is very similar to hypnosis. Then I get the agitation. I'm going to disrupt your life. So like, if you want to change your life, somebody out there, like, I'm going to set goals. I'm going to make $1 million this month, or, whatever the goal is. I need to get that to myself. I'm going to brainwash myself using the exact same formula. So it's not like it's a bad formula. I'm going to harness my focus and where it goes through. I'm going to target all the emotions that I need to get. I'm going to get pumped and motivated and all these things. I'm going to get negatively motivated away from what I don't want. I'm going to agitate my life to tell my brain that something is very different as much as possible. Maybe I'll paint a room differently. Maybe I'll rearrange the furniture. Maybe I'll buy a new car. Maybe I'll shift my wardrobe around. Maybe I'll brush my teeth with my left hand. I'm going to do all kinds of things to agitate my brain so it knows that something is different. And then repetition. So I can change my life that way for the good or for bad.